This week, Jeremy Boerger from Boerger Consulting is with us to discuss the space where IT asset management and cybersecurity asset management meet. Then Danny Jenkins from ThreatLocker joins us to discuss the current state of endpoint security with application allow listing. Finally, in the third and final segment, we've got a few more interviews from Black Hat. Jeff Mann interviews Moore Bin, the CEO and co-founder of Adaptive Shield, about the SaaS security space. Then Jeff Mann chats with a good friend of Security Weekly, Ed Scotus, about cybersecurity ethics. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. If your organization is ready to enhance cyber resilience, we have important insights for you. The 2024 Level Blue Futures Report sheds light on how rapid computing changes affect IT visibility. Our research reveals that while IT leaders see positive outcomes, 85% acknowledge increased risk. In this report, we identify the barriers to cyber resilience, the challenges impacting cybersecurity, and the business contexts that reveal operational issues. You'll also discover what's on the horizon and 5 essential steps for prioritizing cyber resilience. Get your complimentary copy of this crucial research today. Visit securityweekly.com/levelblue. Cybersecurity simplified. ThreatLocker implements a least privileged approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits. It ensures 24/7, 365 protection for your organization. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy International Whale Shark Day. This is episode 374, recorded on Thursday, August 28th, 2024. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and I don't have any co-hosts with me today. They're all busy. We tried to get them in, but this happens from time to time. So you're just stuck with me and whale sharks. If you've never seen a whale shark in person, I think there's one aquarium in Japan and then the aquarium in Atlanta. Both have a whale shark, and it's pretty impressive to see one up close. One day, I would love to go diving in Western Australia, where you can apparently dive with them and go see them. Yeah, incredible animals. All right, our first interview today, the topic is IT asset management. We're excited to have Jeremy Boerger, the CEO and founder of Boerger Consulting, with us today. Jeremy has been leading ITAM teams, which is the acronym you're going to hear a lot today for IT asset management, for over 20 years. And in 2017, he founded Boerger Consulting to focus on that. And in 2021, he also published a book called Rethinking Information Technology Asset Management. We do have that linked in the show notes, so you can go check that out. And I was just relating to him that it's a pretty enjoyable read. I mean, for a dry subject, Jeremy, you did a great job at making that enjoyable even. Yeah, I'm not even going to say tolerable. I'm going to say enjoyable.
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate it, and thank you for having me on. A lot of credit needs to go to Jillian Singletary, who helped me a lot with that book. So it was a bit of a passion project, and highly recommend her services.
So your first and last book, would you do another one?
Well, so the publisher is starting to ask about the second edition. So this one's it's coming up on 5 years old, and I do make a couple of predictions. One has not shown any purchase, but the second one is starting to actually get some attention. And I've been talking with some other asset management and FinOps tooling folks, starting to get serious about building out the digital twin concepts, and very exciting stuff. So, even a stopwatch is right twice a day. So 50-50 is pretty good odds.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends who've written books, and for some of them, it's kind of traumatic, and they sound like they do not wish to repeat the experience.
Yeah, I don't think I will. A new edition adding a lost chapter or two, that's completely different than coming up with whole cloth.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
so very interesting topic here. This is a topic that I discuss a lot. I'm faculty over at an organization called IONS Research, who has a bunch of cybersecurity clients, and the faculty is over 100 people who have been in the industry for a long time. And if you've got a question about something like cybersecurity asset management, I am one of the people that they'll probably connect you with to discuss that topic. So that's one of the reasons I was really interested to have this conversation today. And this is something I do often in security. Oftentimes we get trapped in our bubbles, and we're like,
Hmm.
what does it look like from the outside? How do other people solve some of these problems? And I think that is kind of a failing of cybersecurity. Is we often think of our our part of the industry as very unique, and nobody else understands our problems, and it's very, very hard, and nobody can help us. But the more that I peer outside the bubble, the more I think that's not true, which is why I like to
Hmm.
have conversations like this with people who are, have that outside in perspective.
Sure, sure. And asset management actually, um, there's a couple of lessons in the history and the evolution of cybersecurity that you could take from asset management. Um, when you try to put a pin on when cybersecurity became important, most folks will point to sometime around the early 90s when the internet was becoming more of a household access point, not limited to colleges or research institutes. But before that, it was asset management was the darling of the IT group. We were the ones that were controlling cost spend. We were identifying cost overruns and doing battle with the big bad software firms that wanted to take all the money. Um, Cybersecurity comes along, and all of the threats, legitimate threats, mind you, but all of the threats come up, and the attention shifts. Now, um, asset management star was seen as kind of falling a bit while cybersecurity came up, but we're doing essentially some of the same thing. We're trying to protect corporate assets, one being financial and uh, 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 hardware and software spend, and the other being data and privacy and the secret sauce for the organization. So in a way, there's a lot of synergy already coming out. So very precedent observation on you that yeah, there is a lot that we can learn from each other.
Yeah, and having done a lot of these, the picture that's painted is almost the same every time. There's some kind of company wide effort to put together one system of record. And I'm just kind of interested in your observations and how I typically handle this. Uh, but typically the stage they're at is we've got something like ServiceNow, and it's like it feels like it's never going to get done. We put this big effort into it, and then all that effort that we do gets outdated. It's not being automatically updated. And for cybersecurity, the use cases here are pretty clear. If there's a threat prevention use case, we want to prevent something from being exploited. The Equifax example is a good one because it is an asset management failure. I think is how I would paint that for those who haven't really dug into the details of how that breach occurred. But you have to very quickly be able to find hardware and software assets when something goes down. It's a race against an adversary, against an attacker, and that is not the time to update your CMDB when there's a new 0 day for a piece of software out, or you're trying to figure out what systems are vulnerable to something. So the way I typically handle that, I've not talked to anybody Well, and maybe it's just because they don't have the problem, so I don't end up having a call with them, that are super happy with their shared kind of CMDB experience. And one of the reasons I've observed for that, or this is my theory at least, I want to get your feedback on, is that different people need different asset management databases for different reasons. Like help desk has, service desk has some very specific needs as they manage laptops, end user facing devices, mobile devices, things like that. And security has very specific use cases. So I often urge these folks to just build their own because the data sources are already out there. And there are now cybersecurity tools that will automatically ingest all that data, normalize it, organize it for you, do a lot of that work for you.
Yeah, I would actually push back on that. It's not
Okay.
necessarily that the tool is anything in particular for one group or the other. It's the data that is being gathered by those tools. And the being able to take a critical view of the different data uh, overlaps, what's the common details that need to be known versus what are the specific details for an individual group that needs to be known. That's actually one of the key failures of current configuration management databases. So just like you said, there are specific needs for each group, but unless we know what is overlapped and what isn't, it becomes much more difficult to be able to not only share data, but also share resources in gathering that data. And that, I think, is, if I do say so myself, uh, the purpose of the
Yeah.
pragmatic ITAM method is to really kind of shake things up and say, hey, why are we working so hard in our separate fields? Let's work
Yeah.
together because uh, network management is seeing this kind of activity, but we're not seeing it over here on asset or cybersecurity. Something's going on, and we can all then work together to improve the overall state. Because when it comes down to it, and I'm going to refrain from using the phrase at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, all three of these groups really have the same general purpose, and that is to do their job and protect the corporation and allow the end users to do what they do to make money for the corporation. And yeah, so we've got to, you know, siloing is all well and good, but we really need to be careful about missing out on work that's already been done, paths that have already been tread.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of the things you go into in your book is how
Mm-hmm.
trustworthy that data is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think security tends to reach for active network scanning or
Mm-hmm.
importing directly from a cloud. So primary access to the data is
Mm-hmm.
helpful. I mean, obviously, like the cloud is probably the best thing that happened to asset management in recent memory. Because getting a list of assets is just an API call, assuming you do have access to list all the assets, because
Assuming
permissions
you
might.
do.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Maybe you
Well,
think these are the 5 AWS accounts that we use, and there's another 30
mhm.
you're not aware of, right?
Right, and that's the tricky bit, right? So on-prem, especially on the end user side, is usually pretty easy. From a hardware perspective, you've got one of uh, three major configuration systems. Yeah, something for Apple, something for Microsoft, usually Intune, or the
Yep.
old SMS, or even further back, SCCM,
Yeah, yeah.
and then usually something around for the Linux boxes, which a lot of the
Space.
Linux and
What's the Red
Unix.
Hat one called? Space something.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't even remember. I'm blanking on the top of my head. Um, but the asset management tools are doing a really good job of trying to get their agents and systems out there. But again, you can't know what's out there unless it's been touched by one of these systems. Well, cybersecurity can't wait around for that. If there's
Yeah,
open port or something where the bad guys are going to get in, you got to jump right on it. So why duplicate that effort?
I agree. Yeah. I mean, we
Hmm.
don't want to duplicate efforts, but I mean, I
Hmm.
think one of the advantages of some of the tools that we're seeing is they do just import from those systems where that effort's already been made. So you're not
Yes.
exactly duplicating effort there. It's more about, well, the dashboards need to be different. The
Hmm.
information I need to pull out of it. The reports I need to run are
Right.
different, and yeah, that's kind of what like the ServiceNow infrastructure, if you put it out there, that's why you have those mid servers that they are actively doing
Yep.
network scans and things like that to keep things up to date. And it was Red Hat Satellite is what I was thinking of, which is their
Satellite.
patching tool.
Yes, that's right.
But I presume people also use that for asset
Hmm.
information. I would
Well, it
assume at least.
it really, when it comes down to it, it really doesn't matter. What you're really looking for is just evidence of what's out there in the environment.
Yeah.
And when you're talking the physical makeup, the actual footprint, well, that's one thing. Well, with the advent of the cloud, now you have other people's stuff running your software, and you've got a generation of users that are just savvy enough to be able to reach out there and spin that stuff up without having to go through the usual protocols. We used to be able to rely on the the um, the magic box, the fear of the computer. You don't want to break it; it's doing its work. That would keep people behind. But now it's like, hey, I saw this ad on the Golf Channel. I want to go check it out. Tappy, tappy, tappy. And now you've bought 5 licenses on your corporate card. What
Yeah.
does that do to your security preference? How long is that login going to be on and that data connection there? And who knows what kind of data or ports got open? And how long is it going to take cybersecurity to notice? That's the fight we're seeing.
Yeah, yeah, and we're seeing, so tooling around that's changing somewhat. Where
Hmm.
we now have this external attack surface management category
Yes.
that Gartner coined, and it's only outside in, but it's designed to
Hmm.
tell you the moment a new port opens. Or like I was
Hmm.
talking to a client the other day that found out that their company acquired another company from their
Yeah.
external attack surface management tool. They were using Psycognito in this case, and
Ah.
and that's really how this stuff should work. I get really
Hmm.
excited about it because for me, the killer feature in this product category is that you, as the security admin or IT admin or
Hmm.
whoever, don't necessarily know the correct input for the scan, right? Like you're going to
Right.
miss stuff. Like it's safe to assume you only know about 80%. So what these things will
Hmm.
do is you can just give it the name of your company, and using a variety of open source information techniques, OSINT
Hmm.
techniques, they'll look at Dun and Bradstreet. They'll look at SEC filings. They'll look at domain registration.
Hmm.
They're looking at all these things and try to kind of, I think of it as a seed, and spider out from there,
Hmm.
and they'll discover new seeds, which is the new acquisition, and then
Yeah.
spider down from there. How many systems do these guys have? How many domains?
Hmm.
And with the goal of finding that abandoned stuff, that stuff that is slipped through the governance process, the POC that was set up but never shut down. The
Yep.
one of the techniques that I've seen used in this category, it was IBM Rendori that did this, which sadly looks like
Hmm.
it's not going to last much longer. They sold it to Palo Alto, and Palo Alto is probably going to shut it down because they already have a
Oh.
tool in this category.
Yeah.
But they would look at the footer of a web page, and if it said
Hmm.
copyright 2011, they would raise that as a critical and say, "Hey,
Wow.
like this looks like it's been abandoned." Because
Hmm.
anything with, if I'm an attacker and I see copyright 2011, it doesn't matter if I found an exploitable vulnerability. Like there's got to be something there. If it's sat there for this long
Right.
with that old copyright on it, like that screams to me low hanging fruit that I need to explore more deeply.
Right. Right. And one of the challenges that asset management has is with shadow IT, being able to spin
Yeah.
up new relationships between a organization and the parent company. That costs a hell of a lot of money. It's just the simple death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's just a
Yeah.
little bit here and a little bit there. But if you don't have a way to catch that activity on the out where the money's flowing outwards. You got to rely on somebody that is able to pay attention onto these new things. And it's like, why is this IP call going out to a spot? Hey,
Yeah.
Did asset management miss something? Did we agree to something? And if you want to talk about spidering, where the things really start to cook your noodle is then what kind of technology is that service provider leveraging? Because if you're in the cloud,
Right.
then do you really own that data center? Do you really own the
Right.
servers that you are leveraging to fill out? And I'm sure you could pick out a couple of stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Kaseya is one. CrowdStrike is obviously one. Where fourth
Right.
and fifth party providers, that your third parties go down because of a relationship you're not even aware of. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or
I was
dependency.
trying my hardest to bring in a reference to Jaws and couldn't bring it in. But yeah, that secondary and tertiary threat that you don't realize you've got because your suppliers decided to do something. I don't even want to say not smart. Even with the CrowdStrike issue, they even Delta, well, maybe not Delta, but let's
Yeah.
quite honestly, a lot of the CloudStrike customers were doing their due diligence. It just
Yeah.
was dumb luck, and
Yeah.
holy cow!
Yeah, I feel like that it's hard to blame the customers for that, but then at the same time, you've got Delta's CEO on CNN, or he was on some morning show or something like that,
Yeah,
talking about how they had 40,000 Windows servers, all with BitLocker, that had to be manually remediated.
hmm
The first thing that hits me is not, oh my god, that sounds like a horrible thing to have to go do, but it's like, how do you even manage 40,000 Windows servers, and why in
right.
2024 are 98% of those not Linux containers at this point? Like, what are you
Yes,
doing that you need to run
right.
40,000 Windows
Well,
servers? Like that's a
and
that's a recovery nightmare. Like, I don't want to see that BCPDR plan.
exactly. Well, and it's also a cost management issue, right?
Yeah.
Why not consolidate some of those? Get them
Yeah.
virtualized. Get them into the same central farm, and reduce that footprint and that operating costs. And that's
Yeah.
something, again, that asset management should be screaming about. It's like,
Yeah.
why? Here's the cost over under on what we're doing. And then what do we do with that savings after we've done it? Because
Yeah.
that's the thing that,
Exactly.
um, I like to refer to it. Unfortunately, it didn't make it into the book, but my wife coined it as the Little Red Hen Rule.
Hmm.
And if you remember the story of the Little Red Hen, you know, she wants to bake a cake, but she's got to go to the other folks that might have
The
ingredients
ingredient.
or might be able to
Yeah.
help.
Hmm.
After she bakes it, heck no, you're not getting a piece of this. Why should
Yeah.
you? But
Yeah.
with cybersecurity, there's so many tools and there's so many threats, but you can't keep feeding the beast. How do you control the cost and still maintain a proper threat protection? That's where asset management comes in. If you can take that
Yeah.
cybersecurity data and look and say, hey, here's all these vulnerabilities. Do we need a secondary backup? Are we sure that backup's pointed in the right spot? How many times have we done a failover test? And give that information back to cybersecurity. Suddenly, their activity can be much more focused. And if you're more focused, you're much more cost effective.
Yeah. And I think asset management is one of those linchpins around, a lot of focus we're seeing now, not just on cost management, but the term
Mm-hmm.
resiliency is becoming a buzzword, and probably
Yeah.
should have been a focus long, long ago. And with the rise of DevOps and Agile and cloud and infrastructure as code, we're now seeing organizations that have confidence that they could reboot the whole company in a day or something,
Mm-hmm.
insane like that. And with the rest of us looking on, like with these mixed infrastructures where you still have your own data center and there's stuff in this cloud, thinking, there's no way. Like we can't have
Right.
a single cloud formation or Terraform
Hmm.
script that can recover everything. But that there is that relationship between knowing what you have and where you can simplify it, reduce it, take away the
Hmm.
complexity. Yeah, and often cost savings is just a bonus that comes out of that, right? Like the
Yes.
main focus, I think, in a lot of cases is that ability to recover, that resiliency, high
Hmm.
availability. And initially when people move to cloud, often they end up spending more, but you get so much more for it. You now don't have to pay SunGuard for a DR environment, right?
Right. Right. But you do have to be careful to make sure that you're not duplicating efforts for with service providers that you've already got an agreement with. So, there is that, to push to the cloud and let somebody else deal with the threats and the concerns in kind of an aggregate. That doesn't uh, that doesn't relieve you of any obligations to double check on them and make sure what's going on in the environment, that one of your users isn't going off script and creating other havoc. So it's very much the cost effectiveness. I've got a story if I've got time to tell it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, we've
Never
got time.
discount the uh, the value add of having a cybersecurity person sitting in on your software audits,
Mhm.
because um, we don't know if, but I'm 99% sure that it has happened. We don't know because of NDAs and legal protections that get bolted around these sort of activities. But I remember participating in a uh, software audit, and we knew that there was going to be a penalty, but for extenuating circumstances, we were out of time. We had to deal with this audit. We had to at least begin the negotiations, but the team that I was working with needed more time
Maybe
to
some
get
kind of
their
license issue,
story.
some kind of
It was a license issue.
yeah.
It was, and I won't say the name, but it was a Active Directory management tool,
Mm. Yeah.
and that might be enough for you to say, "Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
those guys."
Okay.
Now, but we knew that we needed something to help the asset management team get this extra time so that we could do our research and come up with our narrative to be able to push back on this audit. So we grabbed a hold of one of the cybersecurity guys, and I told him, "Let's." This was a hospital; they had just gotten their high test certification. This
High
was
tech.
a couple
Yeah.
of years
Mhm.
ago. Yep.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at the CISO and I said, "I want your best rule follower, the biggest apple polisher you've got." And he's like, "I got the guy. Great
Yeah.
big bear of a man. St. Clair was his name. Um, but he knew the rules inside and out." And I said, "Just sit on the call and you'll know when something happens that you need to jump in. And I'm not going to tell you what to look for because I don't want to spoil what you do. I don't,
Yeah.
if anything goes wrong, I want it to be on me. I don't want to be able to point the fingers at anybody else, but just sit there." So we're negotiating in the call, and the auditor asks for the usual report of Active Directory details and uh, the data logs. And they said, email it to us in 2 days. And you would have thought poor Tim was going to reach through that phone and just slap the guy.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that. We can't. It's first off, it's got all of these computer names and IP
Right.
addresses associated. You can't do that. You want to send it over email, and we don't know where it's going from. You don't even ask us
Yeah.
for encryption or anything. Blah, 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 and goes off for like a whole 5 minutes. And I remember looking over at the other. We had the COO at the time, and I go look at him, and his eyes are like that big. And it's like, no, this is cool. And so after Tim is done, and the dust starts to settle, the auditor comes back over the phone. "So how much time do you need to set up a secure FTP server and get the data masked. And Tim looks over at me and I look over at him and I go, and he says it would take a month. But that gave us enough time to be able to put together. And as it turned out, the software licensing concerns, we had actually been bought and were properly licensed. The penalty calculation was a little weird, and I won't get into that. But having a cybersecurity person sitting in on that call and saying, hey, this is critical data, this is PII for the organization, we can't just email this, not only helped us out with our negotiations, but it was also should really be best business practice with these sorts of audits, and not enough care and concern around the data and passing the data back and forth between adversaries gets enough attention. And that's on asset management. We should be much better, paying much more attention and being good data stewards for the cybersecurity group.
And that's one of those things when I hear people talking about, starting their career and going directly into security, that's one of the things that I worry about is the fact that you don't understand how other departments are doing stuff. One of the things I did when I hired people, I worked for a large credit card processor, and we encountered a lot of the same issues. But for the first week after hiring somebody, I would have them go around and shadow different departments, not only so that they understood how the business worked, but so that they built relationships with those folks. So when they had a question about something, they knew the first name. They were on a first name basis with somebody who worked in that group, and that would just speed up so many things. And that was before I got into security. That was when I was on the IT side that I did that. But I continued doing that on the security side, and I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that. But yeah, you're right. There's so many opportunities for departments to help each other on this.
Well, and how often does...
And not keep the cake to themselves.
Exactly. How often does cybersecurity bring in a project manager? Really only if they're installing a new tool or have a new widget to bring on that's going to require some changes to the environment. But that's a perfect opportunity to be engaged and talk to the project management folks, because every activity that's going on right now usually involves a project manager of some form or fashion. When you're doing even a minor topography or system change, talking with the help desk, even not just your status reports, but just being able to say, hey, if you've ever got a question, just come on over and ask. Just to be that availability, to be that how do you want to put it, disarming. Because too often the only channels that you've got is, hey, we got a problem. And you don't want to be the person that hits the panic button and it not be a panic.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I first set up a SIM at an organization, IT kind of, they figured out very quickly that I had put together this system of record that had all events that occurred on all these different systems. And IT didn't have anything like that. So every time there was an IT outage, something caused a big outage over there. And we rolled up under IT, so I couldn't say no to the VP, the CTO. We would get tasked with doing root cause analysis on any kind of IT outages, and I tried giving them access to it. I couldn't get anybody from the IT side. Offered to train them on how to use it, but yeah, there is a lot of duplication. And you mentioned. I don't think you mentioned acquisitions in that sense. I think you were talking about acquiring software, but M&A, any companies that are big with M&A are going to end up with tons and tons of duplication.
Yes. And that is the idea of tech debt. That's usually the primary source, is that you buy this company and you don't realize everything that's coming with it. And it's only after the ink is dry do you start to come up with the, how do you ingest this stuff? Why do we keep this tool and not that tool? It's like, that should be one of the things that starts from the beginning. Because what is the real value? What is the sunk cost of ingesting this thing? If you don't do that due diligence up front, what are you then exposing yourself to? I participated in a M&A. It was with a hospital group, a different one, if memory serves. But they were ingesting a Medicare billing company. But the Medicaid company, the company that was being absorbed, had not been doing best practice around cybersecurity and system upgrades. They were looking to be bought up for a while, so they kept putting off things. The cost of upgrading and integrating proved to be more than too much of the value of the acquisition, and they stopped.
Yep. I've heard of several cases like that where
Yeah.
IT debt killed the acquisition. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just too expensive. I mean, you can get the book of record, or the book of business, but after that, it's like, what do you do with all this stuff? Nah, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the exposure from having all that old stuff, now that's a big security exposure, potential fines, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like you can just snap your fingers and put in new stuff, put in new servers anymore. You've got to be very careful about what you put in and then what you turn off, and is it ready to actually take over the load?
I've seen people do that. I've seen people snap their fingers, and man, when it goes wrong, does it go wrong?
Have fun storming the castle.
All right, Jeremy, this has been a great conversation.
Yes.
It's always a measure of how good the conversation is by how much I have to look at my notes, and I don't think I looked at my notes for any of this. It just flowed. Yeah, there's so much here to cover, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking about it. Jeremy Boerger's book is Rethinking Information Technology Asset Management. We do have the links to that in the show notes. And Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me today on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Adrian, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk about application allow listing with Danny Jenkins from ThreatLocker.